The failures of comedy video games of the past didn't necessarily lie in making the player laugh, but inducing laughs derived from genuine wit as opposed to cheap gags. Jazzpunk remedies that legacy of failure with a spy thriller that feels like no comedy that came before it, video game or otherwise. Now I say that knowing full well that everyone who speaks of the game will no doubt compare it to other works by citing names like Hunter S. Thompson, Mel Brooks, Monty Python, In Like Flint, Airplane, Naked Gun, and tunes both loony and Nick. While those comparisons are apt from a quality and spiritual standpoint, it's important to note when praising Jazzpunk that it only feels inspired by that which came before it, and never derivative of it.
You have bestowed blindness upon me.
Sure, the parody style you'll find here isn't unique to comedy video games, but you've never seen a comedy in this medium pull off its references with such sharp wit and cleverness. There are very few misses in Jazzpunk's comedic arsenal, which means you can expect to chuckle, snort, but more often than not, simply laugh your ass off throughout the entire game. I'm also a big fan of the way the game uses its point-and-click style setup to allow the player to discover much of the game's humor. There are many jokes, some of which are the best in the game, that can easily be missed if the user doesn't carefully and patiently explore the game's world to find them. You probably won't even realize how many jokes you're missing until you watch someone else play the game, or go through it a second time yourself with a more methodical approach. It's unbelievable just how much humor the developers managed to pack into the game's tiny levels.
A home run?
Unfortunately, the same care does not always translate over to the gameplay. Jazzpunk may style itself as a point-and-click adventure, but the puzzles here are a little more than fanfare in there for progression's sake, and they're rarely challenging. You'll spend more time hunting for the next great gag than you will clues, which is enjoyable in its own right, but is also a big reason behind the game's rather meager 3 hours or less runtime. It also doesn't help that the later parts of the game consist mostly of mini-game style segments that stay long outlived their comedic value. Truth be told though, at the end of the day you'll find yourself masking many of Jazzpunk's larger flaws with your own laughter. The love that went into crafting this game is obvious at every turn, and is enough to make you feel guilty for pointing out shortcomings that in a way were almost bound to be there in order to produce the experience this game does. Jazzpunk uses the exploration genre we've seen in indie games like Proteus and Gone Home to produce a comedy and world so shockingly clever and ahead of its competition, you'd swear it must have been delivered from a faraway date where the art of video game comedy has been mastered. It's a one-of-a-kind instant cult classic that must be played, regardless of its shortcomings.